In today's video, we're discussing some NHL trade rumors, focusing on the Montreal Canadiens, where I want to touch on Carey Price to the Avalanche and all the talk going on online here. Plus, I want to look at the Ottawa Senators, New York Rangers, and all three of the California teams. We'll discuss all the latest rumors coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned today, we're looking at some trade rumors. A lot of the information today comes from the Saturday Headline segment with Chris Johnson and Elliot Friedman on the most recent edition of Hockey Night in Canada this past weekend here. And I want to kick things off starting with the New York Rangers. Now, of course, we had some interesting developments with New York here recently when they called up goaltender Igor Shesterkin. Now, many people wondered if maybe a trade might be incoming for one of the other goalies, most likely Alexander Georgiev. But the Rangers kind of shot that down early on. But now it's believed and reported by Elliot Friedman that the Rangers will listen to trade talk on Georgiev. They're not going to completely dismiss the possibility of moving him, but many have kind of narrowed down what they're likely going to be looking for in return. And if you're not anywhere in the ballpark, then they're not going to entertain the conversation. But obviously, they're well stacked in the goaltending department right now. They wouldn't want another goaltender in return. They have all kinds of defensive prospects, either playing or on the way. So it's believed that they would want a really solid NHL ready or very close forward prospect. So clearly, the Rangers are in the process of getting younger and faster and really improving their team with a lot of their recently drafted players. Some are working out more than others, but that's believed to be the asking price that they would want in return for Georgiev. Now, of course, depending on the prospect, I wouldn't be completely shocked if they wanted maybe a mid or later round draft pick thrown in there as well. But either way, that is going to be the asking price. I know there's a lot of talk online about Georgiev to the Leafs. There seems to be a lot of traction there. I don't really know if there's really any talks going on at the actual NHL level between the management teams, but I know there's been plenty of rumors online that he would be good for the Leafs if Hutchinson is not going to be the man, and if that's the case, that maybe a guy like Jeremy Bracco, who many believe really does deserve an NHL opportunity, but is kind of getting boxed out by the forward depth in the Leafs organization, and many believe he would be a great return for New York to go ahead and make that move. So I guess we'll see if there's anything to that. We'll see how Hutchinson plays here down the stretch. I'm not sure that either team is really in a huge hurry to make a move. So we'll see and monitor the situation here as we get closer to the NHL trade deadline. But Georgiev very well could find himself on a new team here by the deadline. If not, then during the offseason. It's certainly a strong possibility, at least. Shesterkin's played relatively well so far in his brief NHL time, and like I said before, he's believed to be the next main starting goaltender, the heir apparent to Henrik Lundqvist in New York, and his time very well might be starting here right now. Now let's jump over and take a look at the Ottawa Senators. They did place defenseman Andreas Englund on waivers today, so he will be demoted to the American Hockey League should he clear waivers. He was a former second-round pick back 2014. He's 23 years old. Hasn't really developed into any kind of a regular NHL player. Has had a few opportunities, but never seems to stick around too long-term. It'd be shocking to find him claimed. There's certainly other teams looking for defensive depth, especially at the AHL level. He could certainly provide that. I don't think the Sens would be too upset either way if he is claimed, or otherwise he likely won't be tenured a new contract once his current one expires. Now, sticking with the more important news in Ottawa, there's certainly questioning the status of Jean-Gabriel Pageau's future with the Senators. Now, of course, he's been with the Senators his entire career. He's a local product, pending unrestricted free agent, having a career season. So it's certainly timed things well for busting out the offensive numbers. But given the situation in the Senators with their roster, his elevated role has certainly allowed him to be a much more offensive player this season. It's believed that there'll be several teams just waiting to find out if he is going to be available. Several teams linked to having interest in Pageau, including teams like the Oilers and the Bruins. Based on the latest information from Pierre LeBrun of TSN, he indicates that he feels that the Senators are going to start contract extension talks relatively soon, somewhere closer to later in January, and see where that goes before they really make a decision one way or another. There's certainly reason to believe that with all the big-time players that have vacated Ottawa via trade or free agency over the past few years, like Duchesne and Stone, Dzingel, just to name a few, that it certainly would be a good win from a PR perspective if they could retain Pageau, who's certainly one of their top veteran players right now, and like I said, he's a local product. It might go a long way and kind of getting a win here with their fans and kind of showing the roster that just because you hit unrestricted free agency into your mid to late 20s, it doesn't mean that you're automatically going to be kicked out of town via trade or not offered a new contract. So I guess we'll see what happens, but there's going to be tons of interest in Pageau should he become available, but it's a question we likely don't know the answer to here for some time. Now heading out to California here, all three of those teams are going to be discussed in today's video. Start with the San Jose Sharks. And of course, the Sharks are in the process of kind of bottoming it out here. They have played a little bit better lately, but they're still quite a ways from a playoff spot, and I'm not really sure that they're going to be able to get there, especially with captain Logan Couture out for a significant long period of time. Now, many believe that the Sharks are not going to go into a sell-off mode. They're not going to necessarily break up the core, that they're going to kind of do a bit of a quick reset like they did about 5 years ago when they missed the playoffs, but then found themselves in the Stanley Cup Finals the following season. Doug Wilson believes that he can make those types of moves to do that. Now, it's believed here that a couple of pending unrestricted free agents could be shopped, including defenseman Brendan Dillon, as well as forward Melker Karlsson. Might make sense for them to move along from those players, but certainly the bigger question for the Sharks lies in their goaltending, which I don't think can really be addressed too heavily until the offseason. But with Martin Jones under contract for some time and Aaron Dell, who is a pending unrestricted free agent, it will be interesting to see how they make some adjustments there going forward. I mean, Dell's played a little bit better lately, but he hasn't really proven that he can be a number one goaltender in the NHL so far. So the San Jose Sharks likely don't blow things up, even though many have speculated that very well could be the case. But although this season appears to be close to being lost, and with not having their first round pick, I'm sure the Senators are quite happy with that for them from their perspective. But it's really going to hurt the Sharks to not be able to make a top selection in the 2020 NHL draft, which has all kinds of deep and available talent that they could pick from regardless of where they ended up in that draft lottery. All the picks really 1 through 10, 1 through 15 are expected to be some really solid NHL future players there. So I guess we'll see what the Sharks do, but nothing too drastic is expected to take place. I really think that they're really, really missing Joe Pavelski. I'm not really sure that Doug Wilson expected that type of impact from not having his captain back after re-signing Erik Karlsson. They just couldn't offer the money to him that he was looking for, and even though they knew he was an important piece and valued what he brought to the team, I think really losing Pavelski has been a much bigger blow than the entire team or fan base expected it to be. Now going to state rival the Los Angeles Kings, it's believed that Alec Martinez could very well find himself on the move by the NHL trade deadline. A couple of things that find him attractive to a lot of other clubs is he's very versatile defensive style defenseman. Martinez can play both the left side and the right side and has been utilized in different roles throughout his time. Of course, he comes with a championship pedigree after winning multiple Stanley Cups with the Los Angeles Kings. He got lots of experience, certainly known as stronger defenseman than he is offensively, so that could certainly benefit a lot of teams. Like, for example, I'm not sure it would work contract-wise, but a team like the Leafs, who are certainly looking to be better defensively, that's certainly the type of player that they could benefit from, but obviously would be challenging, like I said, from a cap perspective. That's just an example. He's not necessarily linked to that team, but there's lots of teams looking for defensive help around the NHL as we get closer to the trade deadline and preparing for the playoffs, and Martinez is expected to likely get himself on a new roster. Very similar situation that we saw with Jake Muzzin. He was traded with more than a year left on his contract, which is where Martinez is. He would not be a rental player, so obviously a team making the acquisition would have to be able to handle his contract next season as well as the current one. But like I said, with the amount of versatility he can provide along with the experience he has, it's expected that there will be a fair bit of interest. Right now, according to NHL insiders, after speaking to some GMs around the league, they believe the asking price is likely going to be a second-round pick as well as an NHL prospect. The Anaheim Ducks has made it clear to all the teams around the NHL that they have cap space and they're willing to use it if it means getting themselves some good young prospects in return. What that means is that they're willing to take on some not so favorable contracts from other NHL clubs, but it's going to cost them dearly in the forms of top prospects that they'll take on here. Clearly, the Ducks don't mind utilizing that space if it's going to benefit them on a longer-term basis. Plenty of teams around the NHL who could certainly benefit from getting a contract off the books, which might allow them more flexibility at the deadline, so they could certainly be there to play ball and help them out. But at the same time, not real sure that we're going to see any kind of those moves made just because of the assets that the Ducks would be looking to take on here for giving them that cap space. It's something that they very well could push further into the summer as well. So we'll see if anybody takes the Ducks up on their offer and if they put that cap space to use in order to gain some strong future assets. Now, lastly here, I want to touch on the Montreal Canadiens. Now, of course, it was discussed on Saturday headlines that it's likely going to be a little bit here before Marc Bergevin and his staff decides exactly what the future plan is for this team heading into the NHL trade deadline. Are they going to be sellers? Are they going to make an acquisition to try to get themselves into the playoffs? It's really not sure yet. They're in the midst of a 4-game stretch in 7 days, and it's believed that they want to wait and see how that pans out before they really make any decisions. But of course, this team has been ravaged by injuries, and their forward group especially a lot this year. Brendan Gallagher got activated, was ready to come back, then suffered a setback, so now he's out again. Of course, they've already got guys like Byron and Armia and Duran that's been out for a significant time as well. So clearly this team is hurt by the injury bug, and I'm not really sure that they're going to be able to climb themselves back into the playoffs, because as time goes on here, they've been falling further and further out of the picture. It is believed that the Habs go into sell mode, that they're pending unrestricted free agents. The guys that they just acquired recently, like Marco Scandella and Ilya Kovalchuk, very well could find themselves on that list. Maybe even a guy like Nate Thompson, who's a veteran, might very well prove to be a fourth-line center on another contending club that they might be able to get a small return for if they're not really sure about his future in the club. I'm not sure what their plans are, but he's another guy that you could certainly keep an eye out for as well. Now, of course, that's not been the only news out of Montreal. A couple of days ago, I talked about some rumors going around the internet about Carey Price possibly being traded to the Avalanche. It seems like ever since I've talked about that, I believe it's been about 3 days now. It looks as though that this story's gained a lot of legs really ever since then, and it's kind of climbing. A lot more discussion going on around it. There's been some articles through Colorado media. There seems to be other people on YouTube talking about it, and it seems to gain a lot of traction here about Colorado possibly being interested in acquiring Carey Price. There's been a big debate over Price and Grubauer. Admit that maybe Grubauer is not going to be the guy to be their starter, and that perhaps the head coach, Jared Bednar, is losing confidence in him, and that maybe they should look to make the acquisition here for Carey Price and see if he can make them become an NHL contender for a Stanley Cup. Clearly, the Avalanche, I think, have a really strong team. Grubauer, for the most part, has had his moments of being a really solid goalie. I do think he's pretty good. I'm not really sure that trading for the long-term, big-money contract of Carey Price is really what the Avalanche need. As I said on Friday, I think the main reason that there's been talk around this is we've seen Price make comments in the media in the past over the last really year or so that he really wants to win a Stanley Cup. And obviously the Montreal Canadiens, I think it's fair to say right now, are not in a position where they can be considered a contender. And it's not really clear when that's going to be. They've got all kinds of great young assets who look very promising, but it's just not really clear how long it's going to take for them to develop and for this team to get to that point in time. And of course, Carey Price is not getting any younger. Of course, we also saw a big trade in the past between those two clubs with Patrick Waugh going to the Avalanche, and a lot of people are thinking this could be Patrick Waugh 2.0. Some rumors speculating that Price had asked for a trade and where he has a no-trade clause indicated he wanted to go to Colorado, but as I said in my video a few days ago, I really don't know if there's anything to that. I don't think that there's really any reliable enough sources out there who can prove that to be the case, and I would personally be shocked if Price was traded and it went to the Avalanche. I mean, clearly, they have lots of cap space. They're one of the teams in the NHL who have the most flexibility. I have no sweet clue what the return package would be if they actually did have conversations about a trade, but I really don't think that in Colorado that acquiring Price is really what they need to do here. I mean, Carey Price has certainly had his ups and downs over the last few years, and really, if you look at the underlying numbers, Grubauer has been equally as good as Price, even though he hasn't really been up to his absolute best at times lately either. So, do you think Carey Price really wants to be traded? Do you think that the Avalanche would make sense for them to make the acquisition? There's been a lot of debate, a lot of talk about it lately, whether the Habs should or should not do this, whether or not the Avalanche should or should not inquire about this. I personally don't think that these two teams really need to be making a goaltending trade. I'm not really sure it's the answer for either club right now, but I'd love to know what you think, as it seems to be the hot topic around the internet here as of late over the past few days. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.